Godzilla is the best franchise no one has ever watched. Despite being over 60 years old and having almost 30 main entries, very few people have watched any of these movies, and that's probably why there are so many misconceptions about them. But the problem might be even more complex than just that, and in my opinion the root of it is in the very first movie of the franchise, 1954's Godzilla. Directed by the now legendary Ishiro Honda, this is certainly the most respected and famous movie of the franchise, but still relatively obscure to most people who have a hard time associating this with what came later. The filmmakers were inspired both by The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, an American movie from 1953, and the Daigo Fukuryu Maru incident, in which the crew of a Japanese boat got irradiated by the fallout of an American nuclear test at the Bikini Atoll. And that's where the movie starts, with a boat full of sweaty sailors being sunk into the ocean by a very bright light. Boats keep on disappearing all over the region. Meanwhile, a small island of fishermen is having a hard time catching anything. They tell the press this is probably because of an ancient monster called Godzilla.
Godzilla? 海の尾を食い尽くすと今度は陸へ上がってきて人間までも食うそうだ。
Later that night, a really freaky storm hits the place, followed by the early morning jogging of a giant monster. An investigation crew is formed to make sense of this disaster. The team features paleontologist Dr. Yamane, his daughter Emiko, and her boyfriend Ogata. There is a small backstory of her being promised to another man while being in love with Ogata, but it never goes anywhere. While there, they discover what looks to be a giant footprint on the soil and living trilobites. I mean, dead living trilobites. Then, all of a sudden, Godzilla appears from beyond the hill and scares the living shit out of everybody on the island. Then, as fast as he appeared, he disappears, having walked into the sea as shown by these beautifully composed shots of his footprints on the beach. Anyway, back into the mainland, Dr. Yamane gives a surprisingly wrong introduction to paleontology to a room full of people.
今からおよそ200万年前、このブロントサウルスや恐竜が
Where did this guy get his PhD? Then the doctor proceeds in explaining his theory of Godzilla being nothing more than a survivor of the Cretaceous period who got irradiated by his recent atomic tests and is now heading to the Earth, trying to escape radiation fallout. A heated debate starts on whether or not to reveal the creature to the public.
何を言うか、重大だからこそ公表すべきだ。
黙れ、火起こし。
バカ者、何を言ってるか。
バカとはなんてバカだよ。最初の最初。
事実は堂々と発表してください。
This leads to the reveal of the existence of the monster to the general public, who quickly demands for it to be exterminated. So we get a montage of naval operations shooting at the sea to the sound of Akira Ifukubi's military march. I don't need to tell you that the soundtrack of this movie is phenomenal. It's very powerful and they would keep using this and several other motifs throughout the rest of the franchise. I got very hyped to hear Bill McCreary would use the classic themes in the upcoming Godzilla movie, but that's for another time. For now, what's important is that the military couldn't get rid of Godzilla, who keeps on terrorizing innocent passengers of a lame-ass cruise. The government asks Yamane for suggestions on how to kill the monster, to which he replies,
それは無理です。水爆の洗礼を受けながらも、なおかつ生命を保っているゴジラを何をもって抹殺しようというのですか?
Maybe another monster, but we still don't have any of these around. The real drama, though, is that Yamane doesn't want to kill Godzilla. He wants to study it, learn from it. After all, it's just a victim of the circumstances, isn't it? Later, a reporter comes to Emiko, asking her to take him to Dr. Serizawa, an old friend of hers who may be working on something that could get rid of Godzilla for good, and he wears a freaking badass eye patch over his face. Serizawa denies it, and the journalist just gives up. Emiko stays behind and asks herself for Serizawa to show her whatever it is that he is working on. Eye patch agrees, on the condition that she doesn't tell anyone what she saw here. And what she saw there is something scary, I guess. That night, Godzilla returns, and the army proceeds to shoot him with weak-ass machine guns. This is the first time we see Godzilla trashing the city, and it looks great. The composition on these shots is very well done, and it really sells the scale of the action. Later movies would often rely on Godzilla fighting another dude on the countryside away from any buildings, but it often just takes away from the dimension these creatures should have. So, Godzilla does nothing much than step on a train, possibly by accident, and trash a bridge with another bridge. And then returns to the city. Following this attack, they decide to build an electric fence around the bay to keep him out. Great plan, it will surely work. So they evacuate the coast and assemble the fence. Meanwhile, Ogata plans to ask Emiko's father permission to marry her. But then the genius has the brilliant idea of arguing with Yamane about whether or not they should kill Godzilla.
今までがゴジラを抹殺しようというのか。帰りたまえ。帰ってくれたまえ。
恵美子さん、そのうちまた俺を見てお願いしてみます。
Yeah, so we can drop the ball again. Godzilla then returns, and they activate the electric fence. He destroys it. The army starts shooting everything they have on Godzilla, but it's useless, and he proceeds into the city that should be empty by now, destroying everything in his path. Godzilla burns the city to the ground, in a series of scenes that are very evocative of the Tokyo bombings during World War II. As you probably have noticed by now, the movie is pretty much Japan trying to deal with recent traumas of its history and preoccupied with the future of mankind as a whole. As the only people who had seen the consequences of atomic weapons so far, they were likely very scared with the fact that both the US and the Soviet Union were mass producing these things. Godzilla is a disaster horror hybrid, and that's where my main nitpick with this movie comes from. It's so different from the others from the franchise. If the rest of them are Star Wars, this one is Alien. It's dark, it's serious, and carries a hell of an emotional punch.
もうお父ちゃまのそばへ行くのよ。ねえ、もうすぐ、もうすぐ。お父
This
ちゃま
is
のところ
dark. It even makes me feel bad for trying to make jokes at this movie's expense.
右手を塔にかけました。ものすごい力です。いよいよ最後。さようなら皆さん。さようなら。
Godzilla returns to the sea, but the damage is just too severe. Upon seeing the devastation, Emiko decides to tell Ogata about what she saw at Serizawa's lab. Turns out, he discovered a way to destroy oxygen in the water in real life that would just give you a lot of hydrogen. But here, it turns fish into skeletons. Serizawa was afraid of his discovery being used as some kind of new superweapon, so until he could find a non-destructive purpose for it, the invention should remain a secret. So, Ogata and Emiko go to his laboratory in an attempt to convince him to use the oxygen destroyer against Godzilla. Serizawa says no. Ogata and him fight off-screen. Finally, Serizawa decides to help, after seeing the destruction caused by Godzilla, but not before destroying all his notes on the project. Our heroes finally manage to find Godzilla underwater, so Serizawa and Ogata submerge to find the monster peacefully sleeping. Serizawa activates the oxygen destroyer device but stays behind to ensure that he dies alongside Godzilla. That's right, Emiko was crying because she knew Serizawa was going to kill himself in order to ensure his invention never fell into the wrong hands. How's that for subtlety and foreshadowing in your sci-fi B-movie? The ending is extremely tragic, with Serizawa sacrificing himself, Godzilla dying what seems to be a very painful death, and Dr. Yamane left wondering if the proliferation of atomic energy is not going to spawn just another Godzilla. And so it ends Godzilla, the first movie of the best franchise no one ever watched. It's dark, it's full of consequence, and it is tragic. It is very different from the movies that came later, lighter and softer, with a focus more on spectacle than anything else. Maybe that's why there are so many misconceptions about the franchise, because it's all over the place, ranging from tragic disaster movie to silly and goofy adventure for kids to spectacular sci-fi action. And I'm going to cover all of it. That's right, starting now I will be reviewing every single one of the 29 main entries of the Godzilla franchise, so you primitive screwheads can have a little more culture this year. So tune in next week when we will be looking at Godzilla Raids Again, the infamous sophomore slump that still divides fans to this day. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button so you can know whenever I upload a new video. Happy New Year!